Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. What a week, and it is only Tuesday. Let's see if we can manage to collect all the different strands of what is going on. Well, first, we may actually have a deal to keep the government operating. There are supposedly details yet to be worked out, but perhaps we will get that done. That is good news for the country. That's good news for functional government. The other big news of the day is Donald Trump really took a gut punch in New York. This is the trial involving the falsification of business records of the Trump Corporation. It is in state court. This is Alvin Bragg's case. And what we had was a series of rulings on evidence. The fancy phrase is motions in limine. It basically means what's going to come into the trial and what's going to come out. And it was devastating for Trump. He's not going to get to argue that he is falsely singled out, that this is a selective prosecution. Nuh-uh. The judge says, no way, that's not coming in. He's not going to argue that he did this on advice of counsel. That's not coming in. He's not going to be able to say, well, the feds didn't indict me, or the Federal Election Commission didn't file charges against me. That's not coming in. What is coming in is a whole bunch of damaging information. We're going to hear from not only Stormy Daniels, but from another woman who was part of the so-called catch and kill story. That is an agreement that he was making with David Pecker at National Enquirer to collect these stories that were looming out there and threatening his presidential election and pay these women off. We are going to hear about the Access Hollywood tape. And this is critical. It was only after the Access Hollywood tape broke that he became frantic to shush up these women. He didn't want another episode on top of the Access Hollywood. So that Access Hollywood tape is going to get played in court, and people will understand the intent he had, which was to make sure there are no more Access Hollywoods so he could get elected. So it was really a devastating loss across the board. I'll have a piece out on Thursday that'll go through many more of these. So take a look at the Washington Post. But bottom line, he really got slugged on this. And you understand why he is desperate to avoid trial. He knows that the law is not on his side, and he knows that the facts, if they get to the jury, are going to be devastating. And in some ways, this is a very meta experience. He knew if the facts about his affairs got to the voters, they wouldn't elect him. And now he's afraid that the facts about his scheme to boondoggle and boonswoggle his way into office, if that information gets to the jury, he's going to get convicted. So it's always the cover-up with Donald Trump. It's always the attempt to avoid reality. So that is not going well for him. But there is good news if you are Donald Trump. You have possibly the dumbest and least competent lawyer in the federal judiciary, and that is Eileen Cannon. She comes out with one of these doozies after another. Her latest is that she is opining on evidentiary motions and motions that involve the instructions to the jury. Why is she even talking about this? We're eons away. She has to make rulings on matters that have already been raised. The questions and the direction to the jury is not relevant right now. And she presents the case in alternative ways, neither of which complies with the law. This comes on top of her very slow walking of this case. It comes on top of a ruling she still has not finalized, in which the prosecutor says, if you force me to release this information, including witnesses' names, we will have a national security problem. She seems bent on doing that. So what is going on? Is there any relief? Well, it is possible that at some point, we hope it's now, that Jack Smith will take it up to the 11th Circuit on an interlocutory basis, an emergency basis, and say, not only do you have to straighten all this out, but you have to take her off the case. That is not entirely unprecedented. That does happen from time to time. And sometimes, believe it or not, even the circuit will suggest it in sort of a back and forth with the attorney. Well, we're going to have to release this. Do you think it might help further proceedings if you had a different judge? And the lawyer would say something like, well, far be it from me to tell the court what to do, but. So that kind of discussion can be had, but Jack Smith has to take it up to the 11th Circuit. Otherwise, this case will never get heard, or worse, it will get to a jury so bastardized and so manipulated that Trump will be acquitted. That's also possible, and that's the worst possible outcome, of course. So we have that trial going on. Meanwhile, the first round of briefing at the Supreme Court on Trump's immunity claim has come in. And Donald Trump, surprise, surprise, says, I should be immune for everything. Nothing I have done should be subject to court review or to a criminal investigation. The Supreme Court is not going to go for that. But I will say this. There actually is an important principle, and Jack Smith is going to have to lead the Supreme Court to this end. Certainly, you don't want criminal trials about every decision a president makes, whether Biden should have given arms to Ukraine, whether Biden should have passed a bill that could have saved lives, whether Donald Trump should have come up with an inoculation plan that would have spared many people's lives. Those sorts of decisions that are at the heart of presidential duties, you really don't want people filing criminal cases after they leave. There's a difference between being a bad president and being a criminal one. So there is some line to be drawn. However, it cannot be the case that everything a president does, including preventing his opponent from kicking him out of office after 4 years, is subject to presidential immunity. So we'll see what Jack Smith says in his reply papers. We're now a little bit more than a month away from that outcome. What's up next? Well, Israel, of course, is always in the news. Donald Trump informs me and millions of other Jews that we are bad Jews because we will vote for Democrats. This is insulting. This is anti-Semitic. For him to say that I have to vote for him, or I don't think well of Israel, or I don't support a Jewish state, or I am a bad Jew, is really grotesque in the extreme. But that's who Donald Trump is, and he said it before. He has said this and many similar things. Excuse me. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer made waves by giving a very blunt, very candid speech on the Senate floor in which he said, it's time for Benjamin Netanyahu to go, because if he stays, we're not going to have an end to this war. We're not going to have a peace process. This was rather unusual, to put it mildly, because usually the two sides don't mix in the other's internal policies and internal politics. Now, I say that, although, if you remember, Netanyahu came and gave a speech before a joint session of Congress in order to influence a vote on the Iran deal. So it's not like his hands are clean. But it was unusual, and it was important. And that is because there is an overwhelming consensus in Israel that he must go. He only has about 15% support. So 85% of the Israeli people know he has to go. They've lost confidence in him. They lost confidence when the attack happened and they were unprepared. They lost confidence when the military didn't show up, in some cases for days. They lost confidence when he has been fighting a war of what seems like attrition, in which the victims are overwhelmingly Palestinian civilians. He seems bent on pursuing that rather than on rescuing the remaining hostages, who, God willing, are still alive. They have been fed up with him. He is a menace to Israeli society. He's a menace to the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And as supportive as the president has been, he, without exactly commenting on Schumer's speech, did say it was a fine speech. It was a good speech. That's quite a statement from a president who is arguably the most pro-Zionist president we've ever had. So there is a lot going on, and we haven't even talked about Ukraine, which is still waiting for its aid, if Republicans can ever get off the stick. But we see slowly the wheels of justice turning, and I remain more optimistic than many about the election, simply because Donald Trump is so dangerous, so outspoken about his evil plans, so obviously ludicrous, so obviously racist and illogical and really deeply damaged, that over time, I do think the American people are going to pick up on it, or at least enough Americans will pick up on it. So I remain optimistic about the election, and maybe we'll get one or two trials along the way. So if you enjoyed this program, you enjoy our other programs, do tell your friends. They can click right there, and they can follow or subscribe at YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever they get their podcasts. Bye-bye.